I'd now like to introduce our next speaker before our next panel session. Our speaker now is Mark Glazbrook from Migration Solutions. Mark is a passionate advocate for migration reform and the strategic benefits that migration has on economic and industrial growth, particularly here in South Australia. He has extensive experience advising on migration policy to government and consulting with business, industry and regions on accessing skills through the migration program. So please join me in welcoming Mark up to the stage.
G'day everyone, thanks for the invitation to present up here today. It's a great venue, beautiful day, and the RDA does a fantastic job in supporting the region, so it's a pleasure to be here. What I'm going to talk about today is place-based migration and what role place-based migration plays in the distribution of migration outcomes and helping regional businesses address current and future workforce needs. We all heard recently that the National Migration Program is being increased from 160,000 to 195,000 to help with current and future workforce needs, but with nearly 500,000 job vacancies recorded in May 22, will this make much of a difference? That's an increase of 35,000 people, but that's probably 35,000 primary applicants and 35,000 secondary applicants. But what's important to keep in mind is when immigration increased recently from 140,000 to 160,000, which is a 14% increase, South Australia's share of the migration program fell by 18.1%. And we know that most of the visas that are currently sitting at the Immigration Department waiting to be processed are from people that are in Australia already. So processing those applications isn't going to really make much of a difference when it comes to addressing skill shortages because they're already here working. Then we have to consider the settlement patterns of those people when they get their visa. A lot of people and new migrants don't choose South Australia, and certainly they don't choose regional South Australia. But when we look at the long-term settlement patterns of migrants, it's interesting to have a look at where they go and why they go to different areas. This is a statement from Philip Ruddock when he was the Immigration Minister back in the 90s, and it shows that the challenges regarding the distribution of migration and the settlement patterns of migrants isn't anything that's a new challenge. So as you can see, the smaller states have tended to miss out on the benefits of skilled migration because the settlement pattern of migrants has been heavily skewed towards Australia's largest metropolitan areas. And the government recognised that measures were needed to ensure that the benefits of skilled migration were felt throughout Australia, not just in the major metropolitan areas. So if we fast forward to now, 25 years later, and not much has really changed. We're still facing exactly the same problems. The current focus on Australia's migration program is seeing highly skilled migrants favoured, and that's people that have got a degree, a master's or a PhD over the type of skilled migrants that we need in regional South Australia, and people with the skills and qualification and experience required to address skill shortages. But why is that? Back in 2016, the Productivity Commission did a report on the best way to run Australia's skilled migration program. And what they found is that highly skilled migrants deliver the best benefit, long-term benefit, because the higher the skills, the more money someone earns. The higher someone earns, the more tax they pay, therefore their lifetime tax contribution is higher than someone that might earn $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Not only that, the more money they earn, the less likely it is that they're going to meet the income and assets test to get parenting payments, or if they lose their job, they're likely to find another job quicker than someone that's got lower skills, which I guess that's true. But what it's not looking at is what are the benefits that we need in regional South Australia and regional areas. So this was a significant shift in the way that the Australian Skilled Migration Program operated back in 2017, and ultimately saw the end of a number of really beneficial regional sponsored migration programs, demand-driven programs, and the removal of the 457 temporary employer-sponsored visa, and that was replaced with the 482 visa, which is the visa that you use to access programs like the South Australian Designated Area Migration Agreement and other types of labour agreements. But the overall result that we've seen in South Australia is that we're getting lower migration outcomes. Highly skilled migrants who get their permanent residency through Australia's skilled migration program will continue to go to the locations and the destinations where they traditionally go. So if we continue to run the same migration program, we should expect to get the same migration outcomes. I believe that the solution is a skilled migration program that favours demand-driven outcomes. The points-tested human accumulation migration benefits the visa holder and rewards them with an unrestricted visa. They get their visa, they can do whatever they want, they can live wherever they please, work in any job or not at all. Whereas in demand-driven migration, the visa holder has to live and work in a certain area, work with an employer for a certain period of time. So the benefit of demand-driven migration is shared. It's just not the benefit of the visa holder getting the visa. If we look at a restaurant in Coober Pedy, for example, they'd be able to sponsor someone through the demand-driven migration program. They'd get a chef, the chef would live there, they'd contribute to the local community, shop in the local stores, eat in the local restaurants, and most importantly, the visa applicant gets a visa to live and stay in Australia. Ideally, the type of program that we'd want to see is something where a provisional visa holder gets a visa for, say, 5 years, and they'd have to stay in a regional area for at least 3 years on a provisional visa before they're eligible to get permanent residency, where they'd stay in that regional area for another 2 years. So that gives them time to settle and really make a valuable contribution to the regional community. If we go back and look at immigration history and the way that the migration program operates and the way that it's changed over a long period of time, between March 1993 and January 2007, which was 14 years, there was 3 immigration ministers. Nick Bolkus, Philip Ruddock and Amanda Vanstone. Nick Bolkus and Amanda Vanstone were, of course, from South Australia. So there was a really interesting regional flavour to the way that the migration program was developing and being run at that time. But after 2007, when Vanstone was replaced, there's been, until now, that's 15 years, there's been 12 immigration ministers. So what we've seen over a long period of time, when there was Bolkus, Ruddock and Vanstone, and they developed this real strong focus on regional migration, since that time, the regional programs have really been eroded to the point where they really don't exist in terms of beneficial outcomes. And I think it's a real problem because we haven't had an immigration minister that's been in the role federally for long enough to really understand the migration program, because it's quite complicated and complex, especially the way that regional migration works. It's really focused on this highly skilled program which delivers a really good outcome for the eastern seaboard and not here in South Australia. At the Jobs and Skills Summit, there was a lot of talk about increasing migration, but also about reducing Australia's reliance on temporary migration. That's the 482 visa program. We've seen and this is something that was happening under the previous coalition government as well. There was a lot of changes away from the temporary visa program, but the current Labor agreement, including the Immigration Minister and a number of unions, have said they want to move away from the temporary 482 visa program, mainly because they're talking about widespread exploitation. So you might hear that a lot about, we need to change this program because there's all these people being exploited. That sort of interests me because that's not what I see. And I've been doing immigration work for 25 years and I engage with a lot of people. But I guess being involved with the migration profession for so long, I know things about stuff that other people don't. I love immigration stats and program numbers, and there's lots of them. There's outcomes and numbers about student visas, working holiday visas, the backpackers, births, deaths, net interstate and net overseas migration. Then every single part of the Australian migration program has a lot of statistics. So it's interesting to have a look at the numbers of people that are actually in Australia, and keeping in mind that the federal government is saying that there's a lot of exploitation of temporary visa holders and the 482 visa holders, and because of that they need to change the program. But looking back at pre-COVID, it wasn't really that there was a lot of 482 visa holders in Australia. There was about 141,000 backpackers, 633,000 international students, 94,000 postgraduate visa holders, and 78,000 primary 482 visa holders. 1,900 of those were in South Australia. So our share of the 482 visa program, even though we're about 7% of the total population of Australia, our share of primary workers at that stage was 2.4%. Then in June 2022, there was, more recently, 51,000 primary 482 visa holders in Australia and 1,310 in all of South Australia. The way that you hear about this 482 visa program, you would think that there's thousands and thousands of people here taking Australian jobs, but clearly there's not that many. What's really interesting about the government's position and what they're talking about at the moment with regards to removing this 482 visa program and exploitation is every single one of those people up there, the backpackers, the students, the postgraduate visa holders and the 482 visa holders, they all have work rights. The 482 program is really the only program that delivers security around protecting visa holders' rights. So the 482 visa program, I don't understand why you'd want to restrict that when it has mandatory sponsorship obligations and employers need to get federal government approval to employ an overseas worker. The program ensures that visa holders are paid equivalent wages to locals, and it requires a minimum English language competency, whereas different programs like the working holiday visa, you can get a visa from South Korea or Japan and come to Australia with no English language competency whatsoever. I think we all know that there's problems and challenges that are facing South Australia in terms of population, ageing, fertility and the unmet demand for labour. Training is of course a very high priority, as is the primacy of employing locals first. But what do we do if there's more job vacancies than there are people available? That's where demand-driven migration and place-based migration is really important. Designing a migration program with clear objectives is very simple and easy. It's just a matter of having a look at what worked previously and what programs work well internationally. We can look at the Canadian model of migration and regional migration, or even the New Zealand model for inspiration. There's a push in the US for them to deliver a program which is going to be called the Heartland Visa, because in the US they have the same distribution problems that we have in regional South Australia. They can't get people to go to their regional areas. A little while ago I did some work with BDO Econ Search, and we were looking at the benefit of demand-driven migration reform to regional South Australia. Essentially what it found was, and they developed a new methodology. So the Productivity Commission have got their own methodology saying highly skilled people earn more money, pay more tax. Econ Search developed a new methodology of measuring migration outcomes, or the benefit of that in regional areas, and found that essentially 10,000 demand-driven migrants living and working in regional South Australia, doing jobs that locals choose not to do, would create 16,200 brand new jobs across the entire state, including 4,100 in metropolitan South Australia, and an additional $2 billion in GSP. So it's really important to have a look at evidence-based research and outcomes regarding changing the migration program to help address workforce shortages in South Australia, but also the broader economic benefit. When you have a look at the, I know I'm getting the wind up. It's interesting when you have a look at, again, the stats and the figures and the exploitation and the government saying we've got to get rid of the 482 visa program. Recently, the Fair Work Ombudsman announced that a record $532 million in unpaid wages and entitlements was recovered for more than 384,000 workers in 2021-22. When you consider that there's only 51,770 primary 482 visa holders in Australia at the moment, you can see that the problem around exploitation and wage theft is far greater than what it is in the 482 visa program. I think using that as an excuse to try and reform the 482 visa program is not entirely correct. Is there a solution? Absolutely. Developing a new regional provisional demand-driven employer-sponsored migration program based on what employers need in our regions is very important. Again, 5-year visa, 3-year on a provisional, then 2 years on a permanent visa would be a really good way to get people to go to regional areas and stay there. At the moment, a skilled migrant can be sponsored by the South Australian government, get their visa, and then pretty much go anywhere in some situations. This is something that happened back in 2010. There was a significant change to the Australian migration program in response to the challenges the economy was facing as a result of the GFC. At that stage, the Rudd government changed the way the migration program operated to move away from skilled migrants or independent skilled migrants to regional demand-driven migrants. So essentially, recent changes to the skilled stream of the migration program have been designed to shift the balance of the program away from independent skilled migrants who do not have employment arranged in Australia prior to migrating here towards sponsored skilled migrants who have arranged employment prior to their arrival. The review identified a need to shift the focus away from supply-driven independent skilled migration towards demand-driven outcomes in the form of employer-sponsored and government-sponsored skilled migrants. The intention is to enable the program to better target the skills needed in the economy and ensure that skilled migrants are employed in industries that have the highest need. And I think we're sort of back at that stage again where we need to have another look at the way the migration program operates, so it's designed to deliver outcomes that are going to be beneficial for all of South Australia, more so in regional South Australia. So I'll wrap it up there and hand back over to you.